Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We're your popper commentators, Michael Petchick and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Oh, good. How are you?
Doing all right. Getting ready for pie season.
Pie season. He's got high hopes. Pie in the
sky.
All right, I'm done. Yes, Sky Hopes. It's from a Goofy movie. I'm locked and loaded with the references tonight.
So before we get into the upkeep, I do have to ask you, what is your favorite fall/winter seasonal pie?
Cherry.
Huh. Interesting. You're the second person today who I've heard that opinion out of.
Yeah, well, it's good, dude. What about you?
My wife is currently in the other room working on an apple pie, which I am very excited for.
Well, you can't go, she's my apple pie. It doesn't work.
Only if you don't believe in yourself. That's all I'm going to say on that. Let's get into the upkeep. We've talked about delicious baked goods long enough. So first off, every week the show is brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. They are an amazing website. They have a great web store with all sorts of art by magic artists and great artists of the past alike. They do dice bags, they do playmats, they do tokens, they do art prints, whatever you want. If you like nice art put in your home, on your game table, what have you, they are your go-to. All of their magic art is officially licensed. It's very good stuff. You're benefiting the artists, you're benefiting this great independently owned business. It's all upside is what I'm saying. Like, if this is the sort of stuff that you enjoy as a human being, go there, become a patron of this website. And just to make things a little bit better, we have a discount code. If you use the code Commontary, all capital letters spelled as it is in the name of this podcast, you will get 5% off. We get a little kickback, so you help keep the lights on our end. And you're also getting a discount on some very, very gorgeous, beautifully illustrated products. Go check them out.
Would you say it's good art? Buy it, you dummy.
Yeah, it's good art. It's good art, you dummies. Just buy it.
Just buy it. And also, it's part of the show where I talk about Patreon. We're on Patreon. Just $1 will give you access to our Discord channel, which is, pardon the pun, poppin'. And you also get access to our pre and post shows. So it's really sweet. And yeah, you should do it.
I will, in fact, not pardon that pun, but I can forgive.
I mean, what can you do? I've already made it, so it's over.
I can edit it out, but I'm not going to do that. So I guess you got any updates for the week, or do we just want to crack into this this juicy morsel we've got on the plate today?
Let's be cracking into the juicy little morsel here. Yeah, let's do it. Oh, let's do it.
All right. You were the one who came up with this idea. What are we talking about today? Because we do have a deck tech, even though like a couple weeks ago we said we were done with them. We've got another deck tech.
I mean, you do something long enough, eventually you can't stop doing it. We are going to talk about one of the two mono black decks that did very well in last week's challenge. This one is the one piloted by Portuguese content creator GLnemesis. We featured his decks on the show before. Why don't we go ahead and...
Is he Portuguese or Brazilian? I always forget.
Oh, he speaks Portuguese. I think he is actually in Brazil, though. You are right.
I was going to say that.
Why don't we go ahead and...
Those are the only two locales I know of that speak Portuguese. So apologies to GLnemesis if we've misportrayed where you're from. But
irregardless, Mike, please include his YouTube channel's link to this show so that people can check him out. If you can understand Portuguese, regardless of whether or not he's from Portugal or Brazil, he does speak Portuguese in his videos. So, but he's a pretty good player. Like I've said, we featured his decks on here before. So let's talk about it. Mono Black, not much has changed, but he does have some cool twists to his list. And I think the big reason to play Mono Black last weekend is because everyone was drooling over Lead the Stampede, which made everyone want to play Elves. And so as we go through this list, I think we'll find that it is very heavily teched towards beating Elves, which is fine. He got second in the challenge, so congratulations again to him. I can't remember what he lost against, but I'm sure you could go look it up. But first off, we just have... I'll talk more about the updates on the list as we go through. First off, we have two... Kumbaya, which is I'm not really sure how to pronounce that word, Quambaj, which is which is the 2-drop that you ping something. It's a 1/3, and then your opponent pings another thing. It has gorgeous new art by Seb McKinnon, so it is actually extremely cheap on Moto right now. It used to be a lot more.
I was going to say this used to be a very expensive part of these lists, and now it is actually pretty cheap online. Also,
yeah, the new promo
great.
is like a quarter. Yeah, the new art is amazing. I am a bit of a Folio fan, so no diss on that artwork, but this is just it fits more in line with what they want modern Magic art to look like.
But still, pays homage to the original, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, where do you see this being best? Because I think the obvious answer for me is against Delver decks. But
against Delver, against Elves.
Yeah. I can also see this being potentially not the worst against Monarch. Just to deal with mopping up some of the tokens.
Yeah, I would be reluctant to include it. I don't think you cut it against Monarch. I don't think it's an all-star against that deck like it would be against Delver, Elves, any of the X1 decks. X1 creature decks is what I'm talking about. Monarch has a lot of 2/2s and 2/3s, and they have bolts. They can just get rid of it pretty easily.
Yeah, that's fair.
But that being said, I do think it is fine. It does help fight. Kind of does help fight Sen's Enlistment, so that's pretty good. And then we have 4 copies of Chittering Rats, the old 2/2. Put a card in your hand on top of your library. Some old disruption. Nothing new to see there. 2 copies Crypt Rats. That's definitely a concession to the Elves decks. Crypt Rats is a 2 colorless or 2 generic and black for a 1/1 that has black, deal 1 damage to each creature. Basically, I think it's technically an X, but basically it's black for each activation.
It's X, spend only black mana on this. Now, I want to highlight this just because what decks that are performing really well right now actually is this actively not great against? Because I'm just thinking through,
Tron.
Like Tron is the only thing that comes to mind. Like, this is, if you can stick one of these against Delver, it's not that much mana to wipe the board against them. If you stick this against Stompy, they do have some resilient threats, and if they've managed to stick a Elephant Guide, that could be a little problematic for you. But I think this just lines up pretty well with a lot of the current meta decks.
I feel like it's even decent against tribe combo. It's probably too slow most of the time, but if you have Crypt Rats black up, you can activate Crypt Rats in response to Inside Out. You can activate Crypt Rats in response to a pump. And they can't counter it once it's already down. So it actually does seem pretty good against that deck as well. But yeah, it does not stone nothing against Tron. You do have a 1/1 that can attack, but it does basically nothing against Tron.
Now, I will also point out, if it gets to resolve against Tron, it still has that mode of just being a fireball at the end of it all.
And as we go through the rest of the list, I think we'll also find GLnemesis does have some good cards against Tron in the deck. I don't think the Tron matchup is unwinnable by any means, but I do think that the decks might struggle a little bit there, as typical of other Monarch decks. And we'll talk about more about that metagame metagame breakdown later. Then we have 4 copies of Phyrexian Rager, 2/2, 2 in a black that replaces itself. You lose a life, so a staple. I think as we go through, so a lot of these cards are staples of the old mono black list. The first big innovation, and this was, I use the term innovation loosely here. This was done back when this card was first spoiled, but the deck was already kind of on the decline back then, is 2 copies of Thorn of the Black Rose, which makes you the Monarch, and is a reason I think that this deck should continue to be revisited, because, and I guess we'll just talk about it now, the metagame is essentially, you're either playing a Gush deck, you're playing a Tron deck, you're playing a Monarch deck, which is what this one is, or you're playing Stompy. Stompy being not maybe one of the best decks, but certainly one of the most prevalent and definitely a pillar of the format.
Yeah, and I think that's a good term to bring up here, because there's plenty of commentary across all formats of Magic of decks that are pillars of the format that just kind of represent known quantities that you have to be able to answer in order for your deck to kind of be more serious. So I also like the fact that Thorn is kind of a removal spell.
in the most loose sense of the term.
Yeah,
yes.
like we're really stretching some limits here, but it can eat anything on the ground. So I think that's a fairly sizable upside for this list.
And I think we were talking about it the other day about what it means to be the pillar of the format. Was that us? I don't know if that was us, or if that was me with someone locally, but like Burn is not the best deck in Modern or Legacy, right? And it's not even the best deck in Pauper. So we have 3 formats where Burn is heavily played, but it's not necessarily the best deck. But it's a deck that every deck has to, be prepared to play against, because it can just run you over if you're unprepared. So not the best deck, but a pillar and a known quantity you have to prepare for.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we have 4 copies of Grey Merchant, which is an old favorite. It's a 5-drop. It drains life equal to the number of black pips you control on the battlefield. So older versions of this deck were basically they weren't all in on this plan, but this was essentially the big finisher, as it would appear in this deck, and is a big reason to run cards like Kumbaya Witches and Chittering Rats, and also some of the other cards we'll explore later.
Yeah, and this was, from everything I've been told by people playing this format longer than me, for ages, this was just kind of a very, very grindy, attrition-y deck, and Grey Merchant was the thing that kind of pushed it up to tier 1 at the time, and very firmly so, because it gave them a way to actually close out the game without having to like sit there forever trying to get in with 2/2s. You just had this big, goofy, like, all right, 5 mana, I'm going to drain you for 6 or 10 or more. And, I
got a bag full of coins.
Together. Yeah, I've got a bag full of Greek coins that I'm going to beat your head in with.
I think I heard it best where the first Grey Merchant closes the gap. The second Grey Merchant wins you the game.
Yeah, it's very true. Like, when this deck is performing well, just running Grey Merchant into Grey Merchant into Grey Merchant is usually enough to finish things off. Also, 2/4 body's not looking that bad right now. I don't know.
To sort of explore some of that other stuff, the reason this deck stopped being good is because it was terrible against Drake, like absolutely awful. Drake ate it alive. It could not compete from a threat standpoint. It could not compete from a card advantage standpoint. It was just absolutely destroyed by that deck, and so people sort of stopped playing it.
Yeah, and now that that's gone, and now that the format has settled in a little bit, I think that's part of the reason why this has come back. But what spells are we working with here? Non-creature options.
4 copies of Disfigure. This deck doesn't have a lot of turn 1 plays. In fact, looking over the main board, this is the only 1-drop spell in the main. So a good mono black start on the play might be Swamp Go. Other person says Delver Go, and if you're end of their turn, Disfigure Delver, and then turn to Quambaj Witches, and I think that might then be unwinnable from the Delver perspective, at least in the classic mono blue list. In the blue red list, they have Bolt, but
yeah, and Disfigure is, I think, for black, the best removal option just on a sheer efficiency scale. Like 1 mana removal is very good.
Yeah. Also, you rushed me through the creatures. I wanted to talk about how there were no Gurmag Anglers.
Oh, that is a good point to bring up. Now, why do you think that is?
I imagine it's because the deck is on the Grey Merchant plan and it doesn't have room. I think in a traditional mono black list, the Crypt Rats or the Thorns have been replaced by 2 copies of Gurmag Angler. One or the other. In older versions of the list, I could see maybe the Crypt Rats on the board replaced by the Anglers, and then the 2 Thorn of the Black Roses probably being like Liliana Spectre or something like that.
Now, could that also just be the fact that, Angler is not the threat it used to be? And I guess what I mean by that is against, for example, Boros Monarch, like you've got the combined benefits of running Alchemist Vial, being able to block with something and then bolt. Like, it's
it's just not.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not as good as it used to be, and every single other of these creatures does something. Like Gurmag Angler is just a 5/5 beater.
And they used to be enough for this list, but I think now, I think in part it's to do with the quality removal people are running now. Like, people are running hyper efficient removal like Skred, which scales very well. And, can very easily take out a Gurmag Angler, whereas before that was a bit of a trouble for the red decks. But now there's a lot more answers that are reasonable against it, and I think that's the big thing.
But further in the spells, we have 3 copies Chainer's Edict. This used to be an old standby for the deck, and is a very powerful card, but also probably the reason this deck was bad against Drake is because Chainer's Edict was so bad against that deck. And I could spend all day, I guess, talking about how bad Mono Black used to be, but I think we're finally getting to a place in the meta where Chainer's Edict is fine.
Yeah, and I don't expect the games that don't go well, you're not worried about not being able to flash this back, but the games that are going decently for you, I think you can probably count on being able to at least consider flashing this back. I don't know. It's a good removal spell. It's not at its peak right now, but it's also no longer like a little shameful to run.
Yeah. Then we have 4 copies Sign in Blood, black, draw 2 card. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. So both an excellent turn 2 play for this deck, as well as it can also be used to deal the last 2 points of damage to your opponent, which I have actually did just the other day.
Oh,
so
really?
It works. It works. It gets around critical protection also. It's life loss. So
yeah, I think anyone who's played Pauper long enough has had the supreme joy of getting to do that. And the black here isn't really a downside because you're not playing any non-black mana sources, so you might as well run the version that has that hidden mode of shock.
Up next, 3 copies Tendrils of Corruption, 3 and a black for a spell that deals damage to a creature equal to the number of swamps you control, and you gain that much life.
I was going to say that there's an extra very important clause there.
And it's an instant. It's the instant, less versatile version of Corrupt, which is also absent from this list. Corrupt used to be a finisher for this deck as well.
And notably over Corrupt, this is only 4 mana, so you're losing the ability for it to go to the dome, but you are gaining instant speed, and you are dropping the cost to something that's a little bit more reasonable. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
Tendrils. This seems like something that is not good against Stompy in particular, just between the Vines of the Vastwood and the fact that, a decent number of lists have been I've been running the what is it? Nest Invader, the one that comes with a freebie that you can sack. I guess my question is this a good removal spell right now?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure. Like, it's sort of just a catch-all. Like, I think it's better than Doomblade or Vendetta or a whole host of other black removal spells. I think the life gain is probably relevant more often than not. It's very good against Affinity, for instance.
I've got to wonder, like, is this mostly a hedge just so that you can gain a whole ton of life and sort of stabilize to get to Grey Merchant on 5?
Yeah, but I'm not really sure. Like, I don't think it's stellar against anything. But I mean, maybe against Burn, if you played on like Thermo Alchemist, then I'm sure it's just awesome. But like, it's just like a solid removal spell that you could probably use to kill something and gain a whole bunch of life.
Now, remember, you did cite the Burn thing. You can target your own stuff with this. You're still going to gain life. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, what do we got next?
2 copies of Oubliette, everyone's favorite overpriced common. A whopping, let's do some quick math.
It's like 20.
Like 10,
it's like $20.
Oh yeah, $20 in paper. On Moto, it's like 2. It's not that expensive. But Oubliette is a Arabian Nights card that absolutely breaks the color pie. It's black and 1 for an enchantment. You exile a creature and any enchantments and counters on it, and then when Oubliette leaves the battlefield, they get the thing back. So it's not awesome, but it is an extra removal spell that adds to pips for Grey Merchant, which is why Mono Black lists almost always run it. The format would be in a very weird place for Mono Black to not run Oubliette, I think.
Yeah. I also worth noting, with Stompy being a force in the format, this is a way to get Rancors off the battlefield without having instant speed removal.
That's true.
Which is a nice bonus upside. Now, I haven't played against this list on Moto. Is there still that like game breaking bug that occurs when you try and blow one of these up?
I don't know. I haven't played the deck very much enough, I should say, to really know.
Yeah, I remember reading something in one of the bug updates that there was some game breaking glitch, which may or may not be in effect by the time you're listening to this. But if your game crashes when you target this spell with removal, don't be surprised. Moto is a product. Not functional.
Moto is a thing that you can play Magic on.
Sure is. All right.
Sometimes.
We've got one last non-land, and I would love to hear about this, and I would love to hear your opinion on it, because I feel like we could talk about this one for a bit.
It is Pestilence. Black 2 for black. Deal 1 damage to each creature and player. It's the same as Crypt Rats, except when you do not control any creatures, you lose Pestilence.
Yeah,
or if there's no creature on the battlefield, I should say.
And notably, that happens on the end step. It doesn't constantly check, which is a big mark in this thing's favor. 2 plays that are interesting are, you can obviously in your like post combat main activate this, wipe the board, cast a creature, Pestilence 6 around. But notably, because it checks at the beginning of end step, you can activate this on your opponent's end step, wipe the board, and then go to your turn and cast out a creature and still keep this around.
Tricky.
It's so okay. So we've got the Crypt Rats, and we've also got this. My question is, what does Pestilence offer that the copy of Crypt Rats didn't? The 2 copies of Crypt Rats didn't already offer.
It's a lot harder to kill.
Yeah, I mean,
there's cinnamon sugar swirls in every bite.
All right. I see the giggle here, but I guess for me, we'll get in the sideboard. There are the other 2 Crypt Rats, so it could just be a concession of I can't run 5 Crypt Rats, but I do like this for what it's worth. Like, you do get to blow up quite a lot of things in this format with this, and I can imagine being in a situation where that is a huge advantage. And again, this does work just as a fireball if you need it to. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. 4 mana is a lot, and especially when one of the top decks is running around with a play set of counter spells in it. Although if you stick this against Delver, I can't imagine that they're having a good time with it.
Yeah, I think GLnemesis just really made a heads up call, and obviously I don't know the guy personally. This is pure speculation on my part, but it does seem like he came to beat Elves, Boros, and Stompy, which are, like we said, three big decks in the format. So, I mean, if you come expecting a lot of those decks, then this is exactly the type of deck I think you'd want to be playing. So I think he's just really in tune with the meta and knew what was going to do well, even if the choices don't make sense in a vacuum.
All right, so let's move on to the lands, and you actually put a note about this, and I want to get your thoughts on why this land base matters, because this is a mono black deck. What could he possibly be doing that's innovative?
There's 23 lands. Turns out control decks want a lot of them, and let's talk about them. 4 Baron Moors. That's the black cycling land, so just some more card draw. A little bit less good because there's no Gurmag Angler, I guess. I'm not really sure. 1 copy Bojuka Bog because, we're black, whatever. And then 18 Swamps.
Yeah. So I like to think of Baron more in the frame of less, fueling your graveyard, but more just, if you really need removal, this is one more chance to draw into that removal at not a large cost to you.
Yeah.
Also, you'd pointed out there are very few 1-drops in this deck, and I think that's the way that that's the only way they can get away with about a little over a fifth of their lands being enters the battlefield tapped lands. So I do like the mana base, and I do like the fact that lands were not skimped on. I definitely have noticed over the years a tendency for pauper decks in particular to trim every land they possibly can, to the point where, they become a little glass cannon-y, but instead, just going, I'm going to play a reasonable amount of land. I'm going to hit all my land drops, and I'm going to be happy about it, is a pretty good call, I think.
I want to talk about no mortuary mire, which may be good because this deck is also not running any unearths, which is also a good card.
Well, I was going to talk. So notably missing from this, no mortuary mire, as you pointed out, no unearths, not even what is that X spell from Kamigawa?
The soul strands,
death denied,
something like that.
Death denied.
Okay,
That's
yeah, death
one.
denied. I'm thinking of a different. I'm thinking of a card from Prophecy.
So death denied is the one where you pay X and X black, return X creatures from your graveyard to your hand. So I guess we're not seeing the graveyard recursion element that a lot of mono black decks pre-Drake showed off, but we are seeing just a dearth of ETB creatures and efficient removal. So why do you think what do you think causes the deck to move away from resiliency in favor of just efficient stuff?
I think got to beat the fast decks and got to beat Tron. I'm not sure.
I mean, I guess if I had to point to something, I'm immediately thinking, what other deck is like, if you get past a certain critical turn, and I'm guessing it's about turn 4 or 5 here, you have to be, I can't imagine you're not favored in that situation. And I've also got to imagine that you might, there's not that many grindy decks. Like you're never trying to beat teachings with this anymore, really. You're just trying
and that was that was also a very bad matchup for mono black.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that definitely felt very draw dependent when both of those were a big part of the meta. But I think it's just the fact that, you know, there's just nothing else that grinds like this will anymore, and they don't need that late game, like, I'm gonna get back 3 creatures for 1 card and start casting them again. I don't know. That's what I'd have to imagine is the case. Now this sideboard, is there anything notable you want to talk about here?
Yeah, there are 8 discard spells, 4 copies of Duress, everyone's favorite B. Look at the target, look at the opponent hand, choose a non-creature, non-land from it, exile that card, and then 4 copies of Distress, which is shown here on MTG Goldfish with the inferior Kamigawa art. But target player reveals his or her hand, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card. So it's kind of like Thoughtseize, but worse because it costs 2. But this deck is okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very aggressive in terms of like leaning heavily into the hand attack side of Black's color identity. I guess my big thing is Distress good enough? Because this deck used to play Wrenchmind in that spot.
I think Distress is better than it used to be. I think that this actually really helps the deck, and the reason that I think that is because it's very good against Tron.
Okay, I can definitely see that. Because yeah, it can't hit lands, but it can hit any other sort of key piece out of the hand.
It cannot hit lands, but it can hit their threats. It can hit Pulsa Marasa, and then you can exile it with Pachuca Bog or whatever. Like, it's just very good at taking the best thing out of your opponent's hand and making sure they can't do anything with it. So I do actually like it quite a bit in the current meta game.
Okay, I can definitely see that. I also do want to point out there's another 2 copies of Crypt Rats on the board. We mentioned it earlier, but I have to imagine resolving Crypt Rats against Stompy is a hell of an answer.
There's actually a bunch of redundancy in the board. There's 2 more copies of Crypt Rats, 2 more copies of Oubliette, 2 more copies of Thorn of the Black Rose, and then a singleton copy of Nihil Spellbomb. Yeah,
I mean, Nihil Spellbomb I think is understandable. I guess my big thing here is I'm looking through, and outside of Chainer's Edict, there's nothing really that plays around in the graveyard that much. So I might almost be inclined to say that Relic might be decent here. I'm sure you're losing some percentage points on certain matchups, but I might kind of like the ability to kind of keep graveyard opponents off of their graveyard for longer. But I don't know. That I think you could go either way.
Yeah, one copy seems a little slim, just if that's like your entire graveyard playing as Bog and Nihil Spellbomb, because you're right, you only get 1 use out of it.
Yeah. Okay, so this deck is not that distantly removed from where it was pre-Drake, but I think those changes are fairly important, shifting onto slightly different game plans. In terms of cost, this is actually pretty cheap online, probably in large part due to that Combage Witches reprint. Thorn of the Black Rose still pretty pricey, but $42 online, and brace yourself here, $109 American dollars in paper.
And that's all oubliette. $82 of that is oubliette, I should say. So it's just because that card is so heinously expensive, because it was only printed in Arabian Nights.
Yeah, and the online version, the 4 copies of Thorn of the Black Rose account for $26 out of 42. So in both cases, there are specific cards that are very much to blame for a large chunk of the cost. That said, there are cards that are not easily replaced. There's no good replacement for Thorn of the Black Rose, and I've never seen a replacement for oubliette that I've been happy with. All right. So do we want to move on to our discussion topic here that you've laid out so kindly for us, Adrian?
Yeah, let's do it. It's not really that weird. I mean, it's not like a very innovative discussion topic. It's mostly just the recent meta shifts. I feel like we should address the reason why I think Mono Black is doing so much better. And we've sort of talked about it a little bit. It's because everyone wanted to play elves. Lead the Stampede is the biggest impact card from Iconic Masters so far. And even in the treasure chests, just the most people are playing with it. And I don't know if it's the best still. Maybe Entourage will eventually find its place to shine. But I think that with the recent shift towards more people playing elves, Mono Black was a great choice. I've said it several times already now. We've discussed it a little bit that 23 lands is a big boon for this deck. It's not trying to skimp on the land base, which I think is a big plus. And it, like I said, it fits into the Monarch Gush Tron meta that we discussed earlier with Stompy as a pillar, not necessarily a tier 1 deck anymore. Certainly one of the best decks for grinding leads still.
Okay. So with that whole like Monarch Gush Tron thing, I guess just maybe if we could kind of dig a little bit deeper on that as to why those cards are like so vital to the format right now.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Why Monarch Gush and Tron are sort of the cornerstones of the format right now.
Thank you. Sorry about that. They're really just, if you're playing a deck, it is probably one of those. Is the reason that I've sort of broken it up into that. And it's not necessarily my idea. I think we talked about that with some of the other folks we're friends with. But like Boros is the quintessential Monarch deck right now. This is a Monarch deck, so it fits into that archetype. There's plenty of Gush decks, Blue Delver, Blue Red Delver, Tyler's Tribe combo. And Gush is actually probably one of the best cards just in the format in general right now. It's being used to fuel all sorts of degenerate things. And then there's a bunch of Tron variants out there right now. The most popular being the Marasa Tron deck, which is playing the main deck Fogs and trying to grind you out of the game and then eventually maybe set up for a big Rolling Thunder. But there are actually a bunch of lists that aren't even doing that anymore. They're just going to beat you with Mold Drifter and keep cycling to Riva Tron, to Riva Horror.
All right, so we've gotten to this point where those are the 3 sort of big things in the metagame, and notably 2 out of the 3 are just draw effects. So, as much as this cannot be hammered home enough, drawing cards is good. Turns out everyone was right, and I think moving. Yeah,
I was gonna say it kind of reminds me when Dark Confidant got spoiled. Everyone said it was going to be a bad card.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, if you can maintain being the Monarch, it's a Dark Confidant without life loss. Now, granted, draw does come at a sort of inopportune time, but a personal Howling Mine is nothing to sneeze at, especially in a format where the average Pauper card is not having as large an effect on the game as a whole as some other formats. So I really think that out of the 3 of these, Monarch is the one that right now is currently doing the most to shape the metagame in terms of the raw power of it. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
No, I agree with that. Mechanic is good.
Yeah, turns out mechanics designed for multiplayer games, such as True Name Nemesis, sometimes work very much better in heads up games.
But
So you talked about Lead the Stampede as one of the big impact cards, and I guess I kind of want to maybe dig into that a little bit more. So we've seen a handful of league finishes from mono green elves lists running Lead the Stampede. Is this real, or are we just seeing kind of a bubble of people playing with new toys?
I think it's too early to really tell. The most recent mono green list that I can find is from actually 2 days ago for elves. I'm not sure if that's just the entity goldfish algorithm not working as it should though. And elves is already a pretty low portion of the meta. But I think that even without the 5-0s, I think it's just a shiny new toy. I think it's the most obviously powerful new card that's readily available. Entourage is still kind of up there. And so I think it was natural for people to gravitate towards that. We also had high profile elves players like Maverick Girl playing the deck on stream. So it's really unsurprising to me that folks were wanting to run it.
It has gotten a very, very sizable amount of press, I guess, if you will. Lots of people have been testing this out. I've also seen it being tested in slivers, and I think it is very powerful. And I think that when we talked about Iconic Masters, I definitely underrated Lead the Stampede.
But that being said, as it put up results in like 2 days. So I mean, but who knows, right? Who knows because of the way the algorithms work, but.
Yeah, the algorithm certainly isn't helping, and I think giving it some time is a good idea, but I would not be dreadfully surprised if Lead the Stampede is kind of here to stay. It definitely seems like the sort of card that just, again, it's got raw draw power, and that is something that is pretty good in Pauper. I mean, look at Thoughtcast, look at Gush, look at all the Monarch cards. If they had been ported, the red and blue common Monarch cards, I would not be surprised if people were trying those out as well.
And another interesting thing about just recent cards, we're not talking about Custody Squire this week.
We aren't. It hasn't managed to put up any results. And in fact, I don't think I've seen anything other than Lead the Stampede from Iconic Masters that has put up any results in terms of 5-0s or challenge finishes. Now, granted, I have not gone through with a fine-tooth comb, but I guess it's a little shocking to me that there's just been nothing.
Yeah, that was a very hyped card. People requested it for a long time. I was talking with Jay Siri the other day about it. Maybe you saw, but he's under the impression that it would have been good in a world without Pulse Amarasa, and that card sort of made people not really want to play that. Pulse Amarasa just basically does the same thing, but it also gains you life. And sure, your card types are a lot more limited, but the creature or the land is probably what matters the most for Tron, especially. So I don't know, just something to chew on.
Yeah, and I mean, Tron is always sort of in that position of struggling with trying not to be a 5-color deck, just to kind of help the mana out as much as it can. So I can definitely see it not finding a home immediately. The one that shocks me the most is nothing from Seeker of the Way. That card looked like gas, but
I thought I saw someone 5-0 with it. I think Methodical did. Let me check Methodical. Okay, we can talk about this deck. On the 19th, Methodical 5-0'd with a list with not only 4 copies of Secret of the Way, but also 4 copies of Searing Blaze.
What?
I'll send you the link in the chat, and we can certainly discuss it. I've not seen Searing Blaze in the list. I guess if you're running Seeker of the Way, though, it is actually a lot better. You clear the blocker, do some damage, pump Seeker, give it lifelink. It's actually not awful. And then it's cut down on the number of Palace Sentinels. And it's running a respectable 21 lands.
Okay. This is interesting. Okay, so Seeker has put it up. I'm looking here, and I just had to do a quick search. He also piloted that in the Pauper Challenge this past weekend. Okay, so Seeker and Boros. We did talk about this, but this is a different, animal than I was expecting to see. All right, so Lead, clearly the big winner in terms of popularity and people testing it out, but we'll definitely keep an eye on this in the next couple of weeks.
I'm sorry for jumping around a little bit. One thing that just popped into my brain that I did want to mention is that we were talking with Alex the other day, and he did mention that as far as K scores go, Mono Black cleaned up during the most recent challenge. Like, it was overwhelmingly the best performing deck.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, and I checked, and we said that there were 2 earlier. I totally missed it. There's 3. There were 3 in the challenge last week. And
3, and they all did very well. I think they're all top 16 at the least.
They went 6-0, 5-1, and 5-1 in the Swiss. So depending on how breakers shook out, I don't have it right here with me. But the interesting thing is 3 people who, unless we see otherwise, probably came to this independently, running 3 very different blacklists, but all with sort of the same core of, Gray Ogres with Upside and Gray Merchant of Asphodel. Some of them, there's one here that's running Grim Harvest and Victim of Night and, Cartouche of Ambition. And there's also, the third one here that's running Twisted Abomination. Like, it's interesting that 3 people sort of came to similar, but also notably different in important ways, variants of this deck. So is this just a good time for mid-range black decks to show up again?
I think so, and that kind of delves into the last point I wanted to make about the new meta, and that is the decline of Blue-Red Delver. It is just not doing as well as it used to. Delver is traditionally a deck that struggles against decks like Elves, for instance. Delves like decks like Stompy, and so the red splash was very key in helping disrupt those game plans. But it is possible now that Lead the Stampede is going to help crowd that out. Although I think that we're seeing sort of a downward trend just overall in the deck being played. Aaron Rubin thinks that it's because people don't know how to play it, but I submit that it's because the deck is not as good as it was when it first came out.
Okay. So with that, I feel like the only logical thing there is, if we start seeing more of these green decks come in and we start seeing Delver kind of get crowded out of the format, I can imagine a return to mono blue, just to kind of, I don't know though. I can't imagine a world where Delver just isn't good, but I guess the only other list I can think of that would run it is the blue black like turbo angler lists. And I can't imagine that those are very good against decks that are trying to crowd the board.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting spot, and it just goes to show you, when we first started this show, people told us we were going to run out of stuff to talk about, and anything but. Like, the meta is so different than it was even a month ago. Like, I'm looking at the top 8 decks here. Mono Blue Delver starting to peak back up. Is it Blitz doing really well for some reason? Obviously Stompy doing the best, but I don't know. It's all very exciting stuff, and I'm always very happy to see the downshifts.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me that we got all these downshifts, and we're kind of immediately seeing fallout, not only from that, but also from these interesting meta calls. And I kind of actually want to pick up Mono Black again, because the more I'm looking at the rest of the meta that surrounds it, the more I'm actually liking just the fact that every one of those cards in that deck tangibly, unless it is counterspelled, it does something.
Yeah, the deck is sweet. We have a local player here who plays Mono Black a lot, and I was talking to him the other day, and he's actually very excited that the deck is making a return to form, and I think he might run it the next F&M, so I might do it too, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very powerful right now, and I guess my question is, I know that there have been, versions of this that have splashed other colors for effects that are a little outside of Black's wheelhouse. Notably, there's been a lot of different black-green mid-range variants of this. I
That
guess.
deck is very different, in my opinion. I will say the big downside about running mono black is a Tron deck resolved cop black against me, and I could not beat it. You can't. There's no enchantment removal. Gray Merchant, I guess, does beat it, but it's a very tough card to beat.
Well, I'm just thinking, I did mention the fact that this isn't running any graveyard recursion, but this seems like the sort of deck that with Pulse of Marasa to sort of stabilize a little bit more. I kind of like the idea of that, like not running a huge green splash, but just like a little bit of one to kind of get some access to a little bit more resiliency, and also a way to sort of blunt the attack of these very, very fast green decks.
Well, I don't like green because you don't get to play Tendrils, you don't get to play Baron more basically anymore. You have to devote those slots to like green black tap lands. So I don't know. I'm not big on diluting the color, but I do see what you're saying. Black does have problems with some permanents, so green definitely can help shore that up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of foster discussion. If I guess my thing is, what is really the core of this, and what can I sort of strip out and possibly add in to help shore up some of the less favorable matchups here?
In my humble opinion, the core to me is the creature base. Like mono black control, there's only 20 creatures, but I think it is defined largely by the fact that you're playing cards like witches, rats, rager. Those are all like quintessential mono black cards to me. The deck used to play Geth's Verdict. That's obviously not as popular. You could run Night's Whisper instead of Sign in Blood. You could not run Tendrils any longer. You probably wouldn't play Gray Merchant anymore. You'd play like a green card with a little bit more high impact.
Okay, I see where you're coming from here. I'm just looking at this list. I've got it open here, and I just keep looking at Crypt Rats and keep thinking about how if I can resolve multiple Crypt Rats, I think there are some decks that just can't beat that. And, maybe it's just a question of adding in Death Denied so you have access to all that stuff again. But, man, Crypt Rats just seems like if that resolves against Stompy, for example, I don't know. I don't see many outs for them besides the mono black player just bricking for a few turns on draws. So
yeah, it's good. I don't know. It's good, Mike. It's good. Come on.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that going forward, this is definitely one of those decks to keep an eye on, and just, it hasn't continued to put up numbers since that challenge, but I think that it's a good idea to keep an eye on this and be aware of it while you're testing stuff, just because if this comes back and can sort of maintain a position in the format, it's been a tier 1 deck before. I'm starting to believe it could be headed there again, or at least, a powerful tier 1.5 sort of affair. So I don't know. We're in a wonderful new world where things are possible again, Adrian. It's good.
And of course, we know that our fans like the meta discussions. We'll definitely keep doing them. I'm very interested to see how this Sunday's challenge goes. It's a holiday weekend, so I hope the attendance is there. It's a shame that we record, like we have to wait like half a week basically before we talk about the new challenge. And then of course you, if you're not one of our patrons, you're a week behind the most recent challenge when you're listening to this.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Schedules and all that stuff. But I think moving forward, we're in an interesting transitional period, and I'm very eager to find out where the meta is headed, because this was a deck that for a long time was just kind of a joke. Like I don't mean to be like curt and rude about this, but it's put up very, very scattered results, and I'm kind of glad to see it return.
Drake made it bad, and then it just kind of stayed bad. I think
and we've talked about this before, Drake kind of, put a hard reset on the format where it warped the meta so badly that people sort of returned to the format with entirely new ideas. And, people were still playing decks that they were playing when Drake was in the format. And as a result, people were having to build decks that could beat decks that were tuned against Drake. And I think we might finally be seeing sort of the full circle getting completed here because the format has had time to heal and regrow. I will say, looking at this though, our metagame numbers, just based on percentages, looking here on Goldfish, we're starting to see a lot more diversity here. Like outside of Stompy, Stompy is the only thing which is taking up double-digit percentages of the metagame.
And it's only at 12, which is fine, in my opinion.
Yeah, but then I'm seeing this huge like band basically of 5%, and then it shakes out to a bunch of different stuff. And I think that's a sign that right now the format is doing good things. So I'm happy. All right.
Well, you're happy. I'm happy.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about with regards to the meta shifts and Mono Black as a whole?
I think I said my piece. I'm going to be testing Mono Black. I think you should too. Again, special thanks to GLnemesis for all the work with the deck. If you look at some of the most recent results, a lot of them are him. So clearly putting in the time. So and that guy does good work. We'll definitely post the link to his channel in the video description. But I'll go ahead and take us out of the show.
Go for it.
Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you in part by the support of our patrons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video or description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because you know what? They boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or an idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Or if you're a patron, just let us know in Discord. You are given priority if you're a patron. Sorry, non-patrons. And you do have our ear pretty much all day. So suggest anything you want. One of our most recent episodes was basically entirely a patron idea episode. So it's pretty cool that we're able to do that now. Special thanks to Pat's Games, local Austin Magic store for all your Magic needs. And L, who does our theme song, Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Until next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.